wanted to talk a little bit about trimming your fenders and what size tire you can fit with how much lift. So I have about 5 inches of lift. I have a 4.5 inch lift with a little 1/2 inch spacer here. I mostly did that because I have this heavy bumper and I didn't want to lose any lift when I did it. So I say 5 inches, it's about 4.5 to 5. So when I did the lift kit, I was obviously rubbing anytime you turn flex. Obviously, the wheel wells aren't big enough. I had 33s at the time, and so I put on these fender flares to get a little more clearance. But what I didn't know when I bought them was I'd want way more clearance than these would give me. So you can see these are supposed to come down and cover the quarter panel there, but they don't because I raised them up. You can see right here where this body line is supposed to have a this cutout is supposed to be down here. So I moved the whole thing up about 4 inches in order to get as much ground clearance as I wanted. So if you have a 97 or newer, you have the windshield wiper, the washer fluid bottle right here inside the fender. If you have a 96 or older, then it's on the passenger side in a bottle in the engine compartment, not in the fender. So basically, I cut all the way up to it as far as I could get, and then I mounted the fender flare as high as I could get. So right now I have 35s, 5 inches of lift. I have about 9.5 inches from the top of the tire to the fender flare. And these, they're plastic and they can bend up, and you can see I've rubbed on them a little bit. Nothing bad, it doesn't damage anything, just more sounds terrible. So to fit these 35s, you can see I had to cut the quarter panel where it bolts to the frame, the body, and I didn't want to get rid of that bolt, so I just ended up bending this one right here out of the way a little bit. But there's a little pinch seam where two pieces of sheet metal come together, they're welded. I went ahead and folded that, and I don't know, I might have to do this as well, but you have to cut a lot in order to fit 35s on 4.5 inches of lift. And I did some great stuff, foam to keep dirt and mud and rocks and everything out of the door. It's been about 6 years since I did that, so I think it's lasted pretty well. It's done a good job. It's kind of important on the other side because you have the antenna that sits right back up in here, and I've kind of covered it. This is what the factory used to keep mud out of there, so I kind of reused that and filled it with foam. You can see I've kind of rubbed right here, so I probably need to hammer it just a little bit more. Let's go to the back. On the back, I think my leaf springs are sagging a little bit. I have about 6 to 6.5 inches from the tire to the fender, and you can see over here, here's the tire. If you come straight up, it's definitely gonna rub right here. These are rugged ridge flares, and they're kind of old. You can see this one broke and pulled through the hole there. So someday I'll have to replace it with something else. Maybe do some quarter panel armor that has a little fender lip on it, but it doesn't do anything for this side of the door because it has to be able to open. Let's see, on the rear, come to the other side. I did the cut and fold, which you can't really see it. See if I can get up in here. You can see, you cut little slits and then you just hammer it over, and you do that because there are two pieces of sheet metal that come together. The fender well and the body panel come together, and if you separate them, if you cut it, then they'll separate and you'll get mud in there, and your body won't be waterproof anymore. So the lift kit you buy will come with the recommended tire size, but things you have to consider are the back spacing on your wheels. If you get bigger, thicker control arms and you put a bigger, wider tire on there, then you're going to start rubbing. So you need less back spacing on your wheels, or a lot of people run spacers. When I bought my lift, I went ahead and bought wheels at the same time. That way I could run a 33 1250. So with a 4.5 inch lift kit, the recommended tire size is 32 1150. So if you go bigger, then you're either going to need to remove your fender flares, your stock ones, and cut, depending on how much flex you want, or get more lift. So the recommended tire size with a 4.5 inch lift is 32, and if you want to run 33s or maybe up to a 35, then you need at least 6.5 inches of lift. And then I know a lot of people like to keep their fender flares, but it just depends on what you want to do with the Jeep. I like rock crawling, so taking off the fender flares and cutting was what I like to do. It's not my daily driver, but I did put on these fender flares because when it rains or when you're in the mud, these tires sling a lot of dirt and mud and water, and this helps mitigate that quite a bit. But if you're not out when it's raining or going through mud, then it doesn't really matter. But I cut about, like I said, 4 inches off the front, and then I got maybe 2.5 inch max on the cut and fold in the rear. The other thing you can do if you don't want to cut is you use bump stops. So a longer bump stop will keep your tire from coming up into the fender and rubbing. It's a little bit more complicated on the rear because for me, my bump stops rusted out and the bolts broke and they're stuck in the frame, and where the bump stop comes down, normally it hits the plate on the leaf spring. So in the rear, you have your bump stops, and when your axle goes up, the plate for the leaf springs doesn't stick out far enough to hit the bump stop. So you have to make something that will stick out a little bit further and hit your bump stop. And then you can either adjust the plate that you make to stick out. You can, adjust the height of it, or you can get a new bump stop, and they make them at different lengths. If you have really big tires, you're going to need a really long bump stop. The front bump stops, these are the stock ones. Right here, you just pull them out and then insert the newer, longer ones. And they're pretty cheap. They're like $20 for like a 2-inch extended bump stop. So here you can see the final product after cutting and folding the rear and trimming the front. I flexed it out on this rock to see how much I needed to cut. So once I had cut enough where I wasn't rubbing, fully flexed and turning both directions, I went ahead and painted the fender, cleaned it up with a grinder and smoothed it out, no burrs on there, and then painted it, just enough to keep it from rusting. Also, I removed the inner fender liners. I messed with them for a while and then just decided that they weren't really doing anything, and so I just took them out. Here you can see I had some decent flex. The top of the tire is below the body line. Here in the rear you can see how close it is. So it's basically fully flexed out, can't get any higher. And it's maybe like 1/8 of an inch from the back. And you can adjust your axle a little bit with the holes in the spring plates on your leaf springs, but it's 1 inch at a time, so you can only move it 1 inch. And so if I moved it forward 1 inch, then I would have been hitting in the front, so I just left it the way it was. And this was with 33-inch tires, so if you go up to a 35-inch tire, then you're gonna need more bump stops. Here's a picture of the front with the fender flares on there and the 33s flexed out. You can see it's really close, but it's not touching, which is what I was going for. So just remember, when people say you can put whatever tire size on whatever lift you want, that you either have to trim or bump stop, or a combination of the two. So that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. If you guys have any questions, leave them below and I'll answer them. If you have any comments, I'd like to hear how much lift you have and what size tires you're running. I look forward to making more videos, and if you like what you saw today, then please don't forget to subscribe.